Shalom. With your permission, we shall say a few words regarding the beautiful holiday that is about to begin. God willing, tomorrow night, Shabbat. El Shabbat is the first night of Succot. To celebrate the holiday of Succot is something that requires a lot of reflection and a lot of understanding. Why? Because what we have regarding the observance of Chag Sukkot is nothing to be compared with the other holidays. We know that Pesach, for example, we have the mitzvah of Korban Pesach and also the eating matzah. Shavuot is the holiday of the Torah, the giving of the Torah. But Sukkot is emphasized with the observance of several commandments. But above all these commandments, we have the commandment of joy. We are under the obligation to be extremely happy and joyous during the celebration of Chag Sukkot. The holiday of Sukkot, in fact, according to the Midrash brought in Yalkut Shimonin, Vaikra, and also brought earlier by the Psikta of Rav Kahana, a Midrash, where it says that in fact we have 7 mitzvot, 7 commandments to fulfill during the celebration of the holiday of Sukkot. 7. Now that requires some kind of elucidation. First we know, by the way, the 7 mitzvot that I mentioned are based upon a verse in the book of Tehillim in chapter 16, Tet Zayin, where it says, Sova semachot et panecha ne'imot bimincha netzach. King David says that when you are full of joy, Sova semachot, satisfied, satiated with simcha, with joy, then you bring eternity to yourself, according to some of the Mefarshim. But our sages derive from this pasuk, En sova ela sheva. No, the word sova, which means satisfaction, it means also sheva, 7. Sova semachot. For 7 mitzvot, we have the possibility to aggrandize, to amplify our heart with joy during Chag Sukkot. We have to explain that. What are the 7 mitzvot? In accordance with the Midrash, as mentioned before, the 7 mitzvot begins with the mitzvah of joy, as I said. The mitzvah of being joyous, simcha. The Torah, 3 times in the Torah, we find the commandment of being happy regarding the holiday of Sukkot 3 times. The first one is brought in, first we have in Devarim, in the last book of the Torah, in chapter 16, and then it says, V'samachta b'chaggecha, which means you have to be happy in your holiday. The Chaggecha, when it says just Chag, it means Chag Sukkot. And the same verse concludes with another commandment, V'hayita ach sameach. You shall be only happy, which means no anxiety, no sadness will be tolerated during the 7 days of Sukkot. So it's mentioned explicitly in the Torah. We have another times when the Torah again says the obligation of being happy in the book of Vaikra, chapter 23. And there it says, V'samachta lifnei Hashem Elokechem shiv'at yamim. You shall be happy and joyous before Hashem, before God, all throughout the 7 days of Sukkot. Some thinkers think that here we're talking about the future simcha, the future happiness that will come, of course, when there is a final day of redemption and the coming of the Mashiach. That we understand. That is spiritual. But in the meantime, we have before us only the pshat, the simple meaning. The Torah says you have to be joyous. How do we become joyous? Well, let's see. First we have the mitzvah of building the sukkah and sitting in the sukkah. You have to live, to dwell in the sukkah. You have to eat in the sukkah, possible also to drink in the sukkah, and to have to even sleep in the sukkah. If you are not sick and you can take it, the mitzvah is to also be asleep in the sukkah. Which means even if you sit, if you have a beautiful house, a palace, you must go and dwell into the sukkah, which could be just a hut. Just a few branches here and there, and you build the sukkah. With a schach, of course. And you sit there, and yet it is possible that that's why the Torah emphasizes so many times the mitzvah of being happy. Because it's not easy for a person to abandon his house for 7 days and to leave his luxuries and his comfort and to go into the sukkah and do everything there. So therefore the Torah requires be happy. In other words, the Torah now exerts us to do something that possibly is not natural. Yes, indeed, it's not natural. One should leave his home, his palatial home, and to go into a sukkah, and not easy. That's why the Torah says, remember, you have to be happy, which means no discomfort at all. Even if you have discomfort, well, fight it. As long as you have a happy heart, wherever you are successful. If you are happy. Even in the desert, if you have nothing. As our sages said, Ezeu ashir, as-sameach b'chilko. You see, money does not make you happy, really. Not necessarily. There are many people who have committed suicide because they were very rich. Which means riches has caused them that. For various reasons. What is it that makes a person happy? If you are happy with your lot, whatever you have, even little, if you have little, but you are happy, then you are very successful. Same thing also, you go to Sukkah. Sukkah represents the exile of the Jewish people. What is an exile? You leave your home. You are compelled to go, to leave your home, to leave your city, to leave everything and to go where, to a place that you don't know. But if you are happy, you can master your future and everything. You go into the Sukkah, you go with the intention to be happy. And you are fulfilling a great mitzvah, which is repeated 3 times in the Torah. The mitzvah of being happy. But the Torah also gives us help. It gave us other reasons for which to be happy. First, it gave us, besides the mitzvah of sitting in the sukkah and dwelling in it, we have the mitzvah also of the 4 species. Now the 4 species are something that we really have to talk about. What are the 4 species? First one, the best one, is the etrog. The etrog, it's a beautiful fruit. It has beautiful smell. You know, so much that if you want to, you could hold the etrog and smell it throughout the year and say a bracha. Borei. There are those who think Borei mineh besamim, those who think hanoten reach tov baperot. But that's another things to discuss another time. So we have the etrog. It's called in the Torah peri eitz hadar, as it says in the Torah, ulkachtem lachem bayom harishon peri eitz hadar kapot temarim v'hadar v'anaf eitz avod ve'ave nahal. There are 4 obligations in this verse. Ulkachtem lachem on the first day. This is a biblical obligation. The rest of the days are only by the sages. But the first day you are under the obligation to hold together the etrog, take it. The etrog is number one. Number two is the lulav. Lulav is a big tree. It's very long, strong. And in fact, with the lulav we hold the other species. Even the etrog, which cannot be into it, but we bring it closer with the hand. And then you have, after the lulav, you have the hadas. I think it's myrtle in English. The hadas also, because the Torah says, "Ulkachtem lachem bayom harishon pri etz hadar," the beautiful fruit. Our sages discussed this point and said that the beautiful fruit is the etrog. That's the best kind of fruit. Well, people spend a lot of money to buy the best etrog, a Moroccan an etrog that grew in Morocco is something that has to be paid with a lot of money. I used to pay $200 for a Moroccan etrog in New York, and here it's almost the same price. I just paid 400 shekel for a beautiful etrog, and I'm sure there are even more. And then you have to check also the second species. The lulav must be kosher also. Nice, big, tall. It's not to be tall, not necessarily, but even if it is, as long as it is strong and not having any bad things which will make it non-kosher, and that's fine. And then you have the hadas, the myrtle. Also you have to check that it is beautiful, that it's kosher. And then you have finally the fourth species is the arava, the willow branches. Those are the four things. Apparently, they would increase our joy. And indeed, when we go to the synagogue, which today is a questionable issue because of the corona, but nevertheless, even if you are at home, then the mitzvah is to go into your sukkah and do the prayer and the hallel, the chanting to God, the praising of Hashem, while you are holding the four species. That's the real mitzvah. If it is done in the synagogue, of course, together with the other mitzvot. But if not, at home also you can fulfill it properly. So let us discuss further the four species. So number one, we have to finish saying the 7 kinds of mitzvot. So we said number one is the simcha, to be happy, v'samachta b'hagecha, right? Number two, the dwelling in the sukkah. You have to dwell there. Number 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 is the 4 species. Each one of them is a mitzvah by itself. It's a commandment by itself. Right? And by the way, you cannot fulfill the mitzvah if one of the 4 species is missing. The mitzvah is done only together. By having the 4 species together, then you can fulfill the mitzvah of the Torah. Now we have already 6 mitzvot, right? Enough to increase your simcha. But then we have another thing that the Midrash in Psikta de Rav Kahana said, based on that pasuk which I mentioned before, Sova semachot et panecha. Al tikre sova ela sheva. Do not say sova, but sheva, which means 7 mitzvot. Why? Because there is an additional one. The additional commandment is hagiga, celebration, eating and drinking. In the time of Bet HaMikdash, they used to fulfill this mitzvah properly. When they came to Bet HaMikdash, when they came to do the mitzvah of the regel, and they would bring also korbanot, sacrifices, and eat them. Not only the Kohen will eat korban shlamim, and there is another korban called korban chagiga, specifically for the joy of the holiday. But since we have no Bet HaMikdash, we have to understand how can we fulfill the mitzvah of chagiga. All right, so we fulfill the mitzvah by eating and drinking. But something is missing if you drink and eat only for your own pleasure. But if you could have in your intention that the reason why you are enjoying your food is because you are fulfilling the mitzvah of Chagigah, the mitzvah that Hashem compels you to do, eat and drink and enjoy yourself, but have me in mind, then you are complete, and the mitzvah has been done perfectly with the 7 kinds of mitzvot, right? It is possible. By the way, a little advice: before you enter, at the entrance of your sukkah, stand for a minute, think, why am I entering the sukkah? To remember, number 1, what happened to our forefathers when they left Egypt, that they had Succot, that they had to build huts in order to be able to dwell in something during the time that they were in the wilderness, and that's in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Akiva and the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer, who said that the reason why we celebrate Sukkah is in remembrance of Ananei HaKavod, the clouds of glory. Those are the clouds that surrounded the Jewish people, protecting them from the intemperies of the climate, and as well as from the enemies behind them, and as well as from every animal or every snake and scorpions and so forth. So when we enter the sukkah, don't go in until you think about those things. I'm going in order to remember also the miracle of the clouds of glory, as well as the building of the huts, and you are doing it in accordance with all the opinions of the Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva, right? Even though the halakha goes according to Rabbi Eliezer in this case, but nevertheless, Rabbi Akiva is also right, in a way. But at the same time, you keep in mind that you are going to enter the sukkah with the happiness, the spiritual happiness that is required by the Torah. I want to fulfill the mitzvah of being happy. So you are going to see the Oshpizin, Avraham Avinu, Yitzchak Avinu, Yaakov Avinu, David HaMelech, Yosef HaTzadik, King David, right? David HaMelech, and what else? And then the 7th one, Pinchas and Yosef. So you have many hosts. They are our hosts in the sukkah. So if you think of all this, there's no question that you will enhance the simcha, the joy of your heart. Do this. It will take only 1 minute, and you have been fulfilling the commandment properly, right? Let us discuss now the nature of those 4 species. First, in accordance with our sages. Our sages said, based on what it says in the Midrash, that each one of the 4 species represents or symbolizes the nature, of 4 kinds of characters among the Jewish people. First, you have the best one, symbolized by the etrog. Etrog is the best fruit, Pri Eitz Hadar. It symbolizes the person who is very great Torah scholar. At the same time, he excels in observing the mitzvah of tzedakah. He helps everyone. He does good deeds. And he makes sure his Torah does not make him become conceited. He remains humble. And all kinds of good traits of character. That's the best. Torah as well as good deeds. That's the etrog. The lulav, as big as it is, represents a person who is full of Torah. Yes, he is a Torah scholar, but he does not excel in good deeds. Why is that? Number 1, why is it the etrog representing the best? Because the etrog is also an excellent fruit, because it has good smell, at the same time it has good taste. The lulav, well, it has good taste. It's a date. It comes from a palm tree. So it has good taste, but it does not have any smell. So he has Torah, but he doesn't have many good deeds. And then you have the Hadass, the myrtle. The Hadass is the opposite. He has good deeds. He does perform charity, kindness, and good deeds, good traits of character, but he's empty of Torah. Exactly like the Hadass. He has good smell, but doesn't have any taste. And the taste is the Torah. As it says, Ta'amu ur'uki tov Hashem. When you study Torah, you taste the taste of Torah, which is a sweet taste, unequal to any taste. You don't believe me? Sit down and learn Torah, and we shall ask you after a year. And finally, we have the Arava. Our sages said that the Arava represents the worst kind of Jew. No Torah at all, no good deeds at all. Wow, then I have a big question. How come then the Torah requires that the four species must be together? Yes, it's true that the etrog cannot enter into what the lulav is holding, but we have to do the best we can to bring the etrog together with the other species. All right, I understand. But what about the Arava? If the Arava represents a bad Jew, an empty Jew, then how come we are supposed to put it together with the others? What's going on? That's something that requires explanation. Well, in order to come to a solution of some kind, so we have to discuss something else. First, the Hadass versus the Lulav. What's better? Is the Lulav better because it has more Torah, despite the fact that it doesn't have many good deeds? Or the Hadass is better? Maybe, even though he has no Torah, but he has good deeds. Which means the question is, what's better? Torah, the learning of Torah, or the good deeds? Well, there is a big machloket, a big dispute in the Talmud in Masechet Kiddushin on page 40. And there was such a discussion among the sages, between Rabbi Tarfon and Rabbi Akiva and the Chachamim. There was a question, what's better, what's bigger, what's more important, Torah or good deeds? First, Rabbi Tarfon comes up and he says, I prefer good deeds. Good deeds makes you an excellent man. Good. That's it. Rabbi Akiva says, no, learning Torah is more important. Nevertheless, the Chachamim all together, the sages, they all came to a conclusion that the law is according to Rabbi Akiva, that Talmud, the Torah is greater. Nevertheless, and you know why? And that's something to know. The reason why Torah is bigger is because it brings you to do good deeds. Indeed, when you learn Torah, and the Torah teaches you how to perform the mitzvot of charity, of kindness, of good traits of character, everything. Without Torah, if you have no Torah, it's very difficult to find a person who excels in all the good deeds. Somehow he's lacking. Right? So now, perhaps we are still in the same situation. Maybe good deeds are better. Since that's the real achievement, as the Talmud says, שתלמוד גדול תלמוד ממעשה, שתלמוד מביא לידי מעשה. Because the Talmud, the learning of Torah, brings you into making good deeds. Which means that the goal is to perform good deeds. So what's better now? Let us use the gematria, numerical values of words. Let's forget about the etrog. Etrog is always special. It's not included, even though it has to be brought together with the other species. But that's the one that is above. But the lulav, what is the numerical value of lulav? If you count lamed, vav, lamed, bet, you have altogether 68. What's so special about 68? Well, there is something very nice about 68, because it is the same numerical value as the word Hayim, life. Hayim, Het, Yud, Yud, Mem. Count them, you find 68. So you see that Torah is our life, indeed. It says, Etz Hayim hila mahazikim ba. Ki hayenu be'orech yamenu. Torah is our life. A Jew without Torah cannot be considered alive. So now, is that a proof that Torah is better than good deeds? Let's see. Let's go to Hadass. The myrtle, we said that it represents the person who has no Torah, but he has good deeds. Let's count the numerical value of the word Hadass. He, Dalet, Samach. He is 5. Dalet is 4. We have 9. And Samach is 60. Wow! That is 69. 69, so what? Well, it is one number. Just one number higher than the Lulav. Is this perhaps telling me that good deeds are better than even learning Torah? The answer, no, is not clear at all. I am not going to be the one to tell you which one is better. Because anyway, one without the others is impossible. A person who does Torah will definitely do good deeds. However, he has to be careful not to bring himself into the trait of character of haughtiness. Because if he stumbles on this kind of sin to be Baal Gava, to be considered, then he did nothing. As our sages said, the Torah could be an elixir of life, but it could be also a poison that brings death. Zacha na'aset lo sam hayim, lo zacha na'aset lo sam mavet. So there is a danger also with that. And there is such a thing that a person who is extremely knowledgeable in Torah, if he does not deal with good deeds, then this man is full of gava. His Torah is not considered great Torah. No question about it. Well, let's leave it as a question, because it all depends on the person. It all depends on some kinds of Jews. Let's not go much into it. But the point is that Torah and good deeds are necessary, important. The Talmud tells us about Abaye and Rava. Abaye and Rava were the giants of the Jewish people in the knowledge of Torah. But they all came from the house of Eli, which according to the tradition, as found in the Bible, the curse was among that family that they should not live a long life. Nevertheless, the Talmud tells us that Abaye, although a giant in Torah, but he lived up to 60 years. He was 60 years old when he died. But Rava, who was a giant of giants, I mean, you could open any page in the Talmud, you will find Rava. And Rava, although great in Torah, lived only to be 40 years old. Why? The Talmud tells us it's because Abaye, on the top of his knowledge of Torah, he also dealt a lot with good deeds and charity and kindness and everything. Rava, that does not mean he was not kind. He was the kindest person. But he was so much involved with the learning of Torah, he did not have much time to, maybe not even the possibility to give much charity. So, he is known as a man of Torah, as a giant of Torah, but not in the deeds of kindness and charity as much as Abaye. And that's why the curse of Bet Eli, of the house of Eli, fell upon him. So is this telling, perhaps, am I having the intention to say here that the Torah is not as good when it doesn't have good deeds as the good deeds versus Torah? Tell you the truth, we don't have to come to any conclusion. The point is, it's very important for a Jew to learn Torah and definitely to do good deeds, to help the needy, to help Torah scholars, giving them money as much as you can, if you have the possibility. Our sages said that even a poor man is not is not exonerated from giving tzedakah. He himself has to give charity. So a person who has money, then he should know that he is under the obligation to give. But at the same time, not only to give money, to give it with a nice face, to give it by giving respect to others, by loving people, as we are going to see now, the final words that I would like to share with you. Again, regarding the four species. You see, the four species I will explain myself. According to Kabbalah also, a little bit of Kabbalah does not hurt. But first, what our sages say, that the four species are as following. The lulav, right, is, the part of the body that is holding the whole body. Of course, that's the spine. The spine of the body is the strongest and makes you stand up erect and strong. That's the lulav because it's the tallest. Well, the etrog represents the heart. It looks like a heart. The hadas represents the eyes because it looks like eyes. I mean, watch, take a piece of a hadas, a myrtle, and you will see that it looks like eyes, human eyes. And then you have the arava. Our sages say they symbolize the lips of the person, the mouth of the person. It does look like the lips of a person, right? Well, according to Kabbalah, those four species come to fix something in us, the wrongs that we have. If we commit any wrong or any sin, it is because of those four things. Number one, the etrog is the best, represents the heart. The heart is very good. That's the dwelling of the thoughts and the feelings. But it's also the dwelling of bad thoughts, desires, temptations that are forbidden, right? It all comes from the heart. Therefore, when you fulfill the mitzvah of etrog, the Kabbalists say it brings a kind of fixing the sin that you sin with your heart. What about the etrog? I mean the etrog was said. What about the lulav? What about the hadas? And what about the arava? Let's start with hadas, the myrtle. It represents the eyes. So if it is done properly, it will bring some kind of tikkun to your eyes. What do we do with the eyes? We see too much. Sometimes we are not allowed to see that much. Our sages said, the heart and the eyes are the two messengers of sin. The heart desires, Alef Homed, and Einayim. When you see something, immediately, when you look at something that is not to be seen, then immediately the heart desires, even though it is forbidden. So, you see that the heart and the eyes are two bad messengers, sometimes. Even though eyes are a treasure, you see the beautiful world with which you can praise the Almighty God and His creation. Go ahead and see as much as you can in that. Hashamayim mesaprim kevod elu ma'aseh Magid Rakia, King David said. Look at the sky, the blue sky, and wonder of wonders. Hashamayim mesaperim, they tell you, the heavens, the sky tells you the glory of God. U'ma'aseh yadav magid rakia, and the firmament tells you the deeds of God. Go ahead and gaze as much as you can on those things. Only make sure you preserve your eyes from looking at things that are not to be seen. Forbidden things, forbidden things that, of course, you understand what I mean. One has to look only about what is permitted. What is prohibited, one should not look. And that's represented by the hadas. What about the arava? It represents the lips, the mouth. That's another source of tremendous, a good deal of good deeds. At the same time, a good deal of bad deeds. Lashon hara, gossiping and talking about others, and spreading hatred by talking about people. It's the biggest sin of all according to our sages, Lashon hara. Well, then you use the arava also, that can fix maybe the problem and the sin that is issued by the lips. That's according to the Kabbalah. We are left now with only one species, the lulav. The Kabbalists say it symbolizes the pagam hayesod, the big problem of the yesod. The yesod has to do with the brit. That's the lower part of the body, which is in fact the most essential part, because it brings the life. That's how you procreate. One has to understand that this is the part that is a gift of God, that brings life into the world, and therefore one should be very careful not to tamper with it the wrong way. And that's called Shmirat HaBerit. It's something that has to be discussed, but people usually, rabbis don't like to discuss this issue, even though it is known that this generation is permeated with this terrible sin, which has caused the destruction of the world in the time of Noah, as our sages said. So the lulav represent the yesod. Yesod in Hebrew means the basis. Well, in normal thinking, the basis of the body is the spine, as the lulav represents, as we said before. But in Kabbalah, it represents the yesod, which is the brit, the place of circumcision, right? The organ. And that has to be kept properly. And one has to be careful with the bad thoughts and bring only good deeds into his mind. And if we do all this as I have described, we can expect to be among those who will be really happy the spiritual way in the coming redemption and the coming great happiness with the Mashiach Tzidkenu in our days. Let me wish everyone happy Succot. May God bless you and bless us all. And תזכו לשנים רבות נעימות וטובות.